the new star was leaving months ago, and year ago. I would hope that in the future that we will do better planning, succession planning, for not only for our teachers, but for our superintendent, principals, and teachers. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ms. Hepburn.
Thank you to the league for sponsoring this debate. It's always good to have a dialogue with the community. I don't disagree with anything that the previous speakers have addressed as the single issue, but I don't think it's the only issue. I think that we have to spend the time necessary that it takes to monitor the programs that are in place that affect the education of all the children in Stanford Public Schools. We have over 15,000 students that we are educating on a daily basis, and one of the prime responsibilities of the Board of Education is to monitor the programs that are in place, to make sure that children are achieving at the high level that we want. So while we're spending our time finding a new superintendent, we cannot forget all the other things that being a board member entails.
Thank you very much. Ms. Carter?
I'm in agreement with all the other candidates as far as superintendents, but I would like to mention a couple of things that I think are important. It's going to be very important to bring in a person who can pick up the morale. The morale is very low right now in the Stanford Public Schools among the teaching staff. So we need somebody that can build a trust and a loyalty with the teachers and the staff. The other thing is somebody that definitely knows the Connecticut core standards and curriculum. And a thing that sort of came to my mind, which I think is very important, I feel that the Stanford Public Schools have just started building a foundation to start our children. This is the first time, and I taught for 38 years, and I can't ever remember this happening. We usually get a superintendent, and we start a trend, and then they leave in a very short period of time, and then we get another trend, and all the teachers do is start and stop, start and stop. And this is the first time I actually feel that they have built a base foundation. This is very important to keep this in place and to keep it moving forward. And the only kind of candidate who can do that is somebody who has the same vision, who can keep us on the same track, not somebody that's going to go off on another vision.
Well, thank you. Now, first, and the question is, what are the 3 most important criteria you would consider in selecting a new superintendent?
Well, one of no, I think that's right. I mean, if you can't hear me, let me know. So importantly, what I want to hear is what the community has to say, what the Stanford community has to say about those qualities that they're looking for in a superintendent. So what I will say is that there are things that I personally am hoping to hear from you and some things that are important to me as well. I would like to see not only someone who has superintendency experience, but a track record in an urban district that has proven to close the achievement gap. So I am looking for somebody with those particular set of skills. I'm looking for somebody who is a collaborator, who can work not only with his set or her set, from my mouth to God's ears, with her central office staff, but also with the administration, with building principals, with para-educators, and of course, most importantly, with the teachers themselves. And it is really important that this person show themselves to be committed to the city of Stanford. We are, as we all like to say, terribly unique, and people poo-poo that until they kind of get in here, and then they say, wow, this is a really challenging district, and so I'm looking for somebody who has some knowledge about the city of Stanford.
Thank you, Ms. Murphy. You're next.
I have no litmus test for the next superintendent. However, I do believe, if I had my choice, is I like someone who was previously either a superintendent or an assistant superintendent, and definitely someone who has experience as a principal and teacher. I'd like to see someone who sets very high standards. I like someone to come in here and say, my goal is 90% of our third graders reading at goal after 2 or 3 years. And then just give the principals the challenge to meet that goal and also the tools to meet those goals. I like to see someone who has experience in showing improvement in achievement for our children. So other than, and I think we need someone also who understands, the Connecticut laws for the duties of a superintendent. It has to be a superintendent who understands the duties of the board and his duties. I think there could be sometimes there's a problem that develops in that area as well. Thank you.
Okay, Ms. Hartman.
I don't disagree with anything I've heard, so how about a couple of things that I would not like to see as a superintendent?
Sounds good.
I'm hoping that we won't be hiring a superintendent who wants to come in and make a lot of changes. We don't need new curriculum. We don't need to purchase new books. We have asked our teachers over the last several years to take on a tremendous number of new programs. And we have to give those programs time to take hold. We have to give ourselves time to fully train all of our teachers. So I would hope that we would not be looking for wholesale changes. If I could say one thing about a comment that was made in the earlier question, because I thought we were going to get a 30-second.
You have the floor.
Yeah, so I'll just take my 30 seconds. I disagree with Ms. Carter about the morale of the teachers in the Stamford Public Schools. I'm in and out of the schools all the time, and sometimes they're impromptu visits, sometimes they're not. But I don't find low morale. I find just the opposite. I find that the teachers are very excited about the new science program that we're doing. They're very excited about the fact that we have common curriculum across the district, that we have standardized assessments. They're very excited about educating children, and so I'm not finding that at all.
All right. Ms. Carter, what do you have to say about that?
The morale.
Let's talk to the superintendent first.
Oh, okay. All right, superintendent, I'm in agreement with all of the comments so far that were made. I really think it's somebody that needs to build respect and trust and loyalty within the school staff and the community. And very important that they know the Connecticut curriculum. And as I said before, which is a very important and which Mrs. Heffernan just mentioned, the foundation has already been laid in the Stamford Public Schools, and this is the first time I've ever seen anything of this caliber, and it is going to be very important to bring in somebody who can continue in that line, in that direction.
All right.
Thank you. In terms of the 3 criteria for both teaching and building administrative experience, I've been meeting with administrators, I've been meeting with teachers, and that's the first thing they say, a teaching and building administrator experience. I think we need somebody who understands their role as the chief administrator, as the CEO, whereas the board's role is the chief policy-making body. The superintendent works for the board doesn't work for the superintendent. And finally, I think we need somebody who's going to put Stanford's kids first. I've lived here my whole life, and I have seen many times superintendents with fancy credentials who wow people. I'm talking in the 1970s forward, who come to town with a lot of excitement and turn around and leave promptly to go to the next big job. I'm not just talking about our last superintendent, I'm talking about a lot of superintendents. Our kids come first, not the career of anybody else. Thank you.
Would anybody else like to use their 30-second rebuttal at this point? No. All right, next question then, which will go to Ms. Murphy first. What would be your approach to advances or increases in the school board budget? What would be your approach to analyzing the expenses or increases in the school budget?
First, if I was on the board today, I'd be asking the Board of Finance and the Mayor for guidance of what kind of increases we can expect, or what would be an appropriate guide. increase that we can plan for. Secondly, I would ask for some, what is going to be the potential impact of the reval. So you have to have guidance. First of all, to start off, you're doing your budgets. The next thing I would like to see is if I would like to do, I was going to do it fresh, I would like to do some student-based budgeting as well. Student-based budgeting means you look at the students, you know, in each of the schools, and then say if you have some students will get 10,000, special ed students gets like 12,000, and the special ed students, English language learner may get 14,000. And then you allocate the monies that way, and then you know the principals have a way to allocate that money. Do they want an extra teacher as opposed to an extra janitor at the school? So that'd be another approach to look at it, how our equity and our funding for the schools.
All right, thank you, Ms. Hefner.
Thank you. My first year on the Board of Education, in 2008, I was fiscal chair. In my second year, I was president of the board, and this year, I was just appointed to the fiscal committee again. I know how to read the budgets. I know how to get answers to the questions that I have. It takes a while to become a knowledgeable board member. And reading budgets is not everybody's forte. So you have to partner with other members of the Board of Education, meet on a regular basis, meet with staff, so that you understand all of the ramifications of the dollars that are in the budget. It's also important to understand where the city's coming from. They don't tell us all the time what it is we're going to get in an increase or in a decrease, but we, from having conversations with other members on the Board of Reps and the Board of Finance, we get an idea of where they're going, and our budgets are usually, for the last couple of years, built around reality, what we're actually, close to what we're actually going to get. Because it's unfair to the community to think that they're going to get programs funded, which actually we won't get the money to fund. But a trust level has been built up over the several years with Board of Finance and the Board of Reps. So they believe our budgets. Their contentiousness isn't there anymore from years ago. So I'm looking to follow through with that.
Thank you, Ms. Gordon.
I'm noticing that Stanford enrollment keeps increasing, and one of the things I think is most important with the budget is to make sure we keep our teachers and our para-educators. We need to keep the people that are in the classroom every day, every minute, working with your children. That's how the education is going to improve. So that's one of the places that I wouldn't be in favor of cutting the budget. I would want to look across the board too, because I don't think you should just take away one entire program. I look for probably a program that maybe is smaller in size and maybe not have as many people or children that are being affected by it, and maybe cutting it would be harmful to the system, but nothing where you come with a direct staff that's working with the children every day.
All right, Mr. Klein.
Thank you. In terms of broad brush, I mean, the Board of Ed is the policy-setting body. It sets the themes, it sets the big picture issues. So to me, the focus needs to be on money in the classroom, not money on fad projects and not money on central office, money in the classroom. Secondly, the Board of Ed needs to be out there advocating for the notion that schools are an investment in our community. And you need to advocate that locally and publicly among the local taxpayers, and we need to somehow ramp up the effort to lobby Hartford to give us our fair share. I pulled something off the CJEF website when I was doing one of these forums as the moderator a couple of years ago, and this is from 2009. The city of Stafford, Connecticut, which comes right before Stamford on this list. The city of Stafford, Connecticut, I take it a lot of us don't know where Stafford is. Stafford receives from the state of Connecticut $5,083 per student in 2008-2009. Same year, Stanford received $508. $5,000 from Stafford, $500 for Stanford. So this Board of Education needs to get out in front of this statewide issue and bring the dollars that we send to Hartford back to Stanford. Thank you.
Ms. Wade.
Thank you. So, I think the process that we put in place under the previous administration's leadership was a process that evolved, grew, was refined in terms of staffing and programming, is 4.75% increase. The board then recommended that she come in looking at something 3.5, 4, anywhere somewhere under 4, which to my ears sounds like we're talking about cuts. So does that mean we're talking about program cuts, or does that mean we're talking about staffing cuts? We have presented budgets over the years that have been increasingly lean. We have we are short-staffed in many areas in terms of administration, in the buildings, downtown. We have class sizes that have grown. So I posit to all of you, if in fact the education budget matters, then we all need to be at the table lobbying the city of Stamford, trying to make everyone understand that in fact the Board of Education budget needs to be supported.
Thank you very much. Anybody wants to add? Here. And this question goes to Ms. Heckman. Why is middle school reform such a divisive issue, and what should be done to improve the situation?
I think that middle school transformation is a divisive issue because people have very strongly held beliefs. I think that we aren't talking to each other enough. Those of us on the Board of Education look at the data that is being presented to us on a yearly basis. We see something that doesn't appear to me to be obvious to the rest of the community or to some of the community. We are seeing an increase in achievement. We are seeing a decrease in the achievement gap. So the argument that I hear is, well, figures can be spun. Numbers can be looked at in various ways. These are numbers which are on the State Board of Education's website. We have closed the achievement gap in math over the last 6 years by over 13 points. We have closed the achievement gap in reading, 5 points. We have a long way to go. But I think that the data is showing us that we're moving in the right direction. We are actually, for the first time, moving the dial. We have more children who are moving from basic and below basic into proficient and to gold. So I think if we talk to each other more, we might come to some common ground based on data that we're seeing.
Ms. Carter.
I've talked to just a few educators, okay, people that I know, that I trust, that I know are good teachers. And I think what the problem is we didn't understand what actually took place in the public school, starting at the elementary level, the foundation that was built, and moving up to the middle school. And I taught middle school for 27 years, and I understand what goes on in the logistics. The thing that's important is that they're teaching the core standards. You can do that with a mixed group. They are providing enrichment programs, and they are providing intervention. So it means that even if you are mixed abilities together, you're still getting help if you need help in those particular areas, and you're also getting enrichment so that you can think at higher level thinking skills. And I think we're on the right track.
Okay, let me restate the question. Why is middle school reform such a divisive issue? And what should be done to improve the situation?
Thank you. I'll take your rereading of the question as the one to get me to stick to that, and I'm happy to.
No, it's in part, your responses are your own.
Understood.
I'm just making sure that everybody knows what the question is.
This is the one issue where if you go and look at the Stanford Advocate Archives or Google me, which is apparently a verb, you can see lots and lots of things that I've written on this topic, as well as some other topics of interest to me about education at Stanford. But the question is a good one, which is why is it a divisive issue? The notion of middle school reform in and of itself doesn't have to need to be a divisive issue. I think it was the way that it came about in the community. I think that some wonderful ideas were espoused about how to restructure our middle schools and the goals surrounding them. And because people feel so strongly about their children on all sides of the issue, and because I believe that not necessarily all of the plans were made public sufficiently in advance of when the transformation took place, that you saw a lot of parents nervous, unhappy, and concerned, and you saw community groups equally nervous, happy, unhappy, and concerned. But I think more discussion, more observation, more study of the program is something that needs to be done, and it needs to be done in a friendly, intellectual, and conversational way, not in a combative way. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Wade?
Yes. I know that there were parents that were nervous, unhappy, and concerned. And I think that it stems from the fact that change, especially when it's change around your own precious child, is very frightening. Change in and of itself is challenging. But when you pass an equity policy that talks about the redistribution of resources equitably, then it goes to reason that those populations that have been underserved by the Stanford Public Schools since the early 70s would be viewed in a different light if in fact you're trying to redistribute resources. And while there were parents that were concerned, I can say unequivocally that there were hundreds of parents who were thrilled, who were happy with the attention, who felt that it was time that in fact their children had an opportunity to access the best teachers in Stanford, the best resources that the school district had to offer. And they have rallied around this cause as well. So what it's created by a conversation that I am sure was never intended to be so. It's created a conversation that is seen in lights that I don't think anybody on either side has intended this to be.
Thank you very much. Ms. Murder.
Thank you. I think there are many positives and negatives with the middle school reform. The positive is ridding ourselves of the old rigid tracking system where the students did not have the ability to move up and down in the various tracks. It was wrong and discriminatory since at least 1967. That has been the law of the land. How it continued, I don't know. But now we have at least flexible movement among the various tracks. We have 3 tracks for 3 groupings for math and 2 for English, which are positive. A negative, though, about it is that when it was passed, middle school reform, I was told that there was supposed to be an enrichment course for those students who are advancing along the curriculum. That enrichment course was not implemented. It was also became a question about the fact that we have such a wide disparity among our students' abilities that the groupings that we have now, the 2 and 3 groupings, are not adequate. So I believe, and if that was not taken properly into account, I believe we should revisit this middle school reform. I think it is imperative that we revisit it and we determine what is the appropriate number of groupings sooner rather than later. Thank you.
Anybody would like to add a comment? Ms. Evans?
I I think possibly the worst thing that we could do and the most divisive thing that we could do is to constantly revisit this issue. The strategic district improvement plan that we've adopted, that the Stanford Board of Education adopted in 2008, which was then adopted by the State Board of Education, is the roadmap for improving this district. When we were up at the State Board of Education in 2008 to present our plan, Dr. Starr testified that we would be going to 2 ability groups, and the State Board of Education wanted us to have no ability groups because they don't believe that children can all receive high-level education in more than one group. If we constantly talk about this,
Is there...
I hope there'll be more questions on this issue.
Do you wish to comment? Mr. Myers? 30 seconds for the reply.
I addressed this issue of whether it was divisive, and I tried to stick to my answer there, but I do, on the merits of it, I want to comment on a couple things. The current system is 2 groups in 6th grade for everything, 2 groups in 8th grade for everything, although we'll see what happens next year. And in 7th grade for math, there's a very small 3rd group for math in which advanced students, a handful, are taking Algebra 1, which is very exciting. I think we're one of the only school systems in America to offer Algebra 1 to 7th graders.
Okay, I know it's a very complicated question. All right, Ms. Murphy, go ahead. 30 seconds.
In equity, you have to, putting all these students in the same classroom when certain students need special attention is not equity. And I think we can all agree, just giving an example, if you just had a new student, say, he only spoke Chinese, to put him in a class where you only have English teaching at grade levels would not be giving him an effective, meaningful education. So you really have to look at the needs of the students, especially in Stanford where we have such a disparity in students' abilities. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, we're going to leave this topic, but we're still staying on curriculum. Ms. Carter, this is your question first.
Instead of starting all over again.
So, if you were to summarize, the superintendent.
Superintendent would be the initial person, but it has to be, there has to be an agreement with the community and the teachers. I mean, other people are involved.
Thank you, Mr. Carr.
Thank you. The word was direct, who directs the curriculum. And that's susceptible to several different tiers of people. By state law, the Board of Education sets the curriculum, and the last board or the board before it adopted a whole new set of standards, which are quite lengthy for the curriculum. So the board broadly sets the curriculum. Clearly the administration, the superintendent's office, directs day to day the curriculum. But one of the things I'd like to see is while following these rigid standards and while following the centralized curriculum, we not have a one-size-fits-all approach to our system. I think we should be looking at what our best teachers in Stanford are doing at all the different schools, and we should have teachers share among inside the school buildings and beyond the school buildings in terms of how to implement that curriculum that's directed from above. So it's really the teacher, the superintendent, and ultimately the Board of Education that sets the curriculum itself. Thank you.
Ms. Wade?
Thank you. In 2014, a common core set of standards, a common curriculum across 44 states in the District of Columbia will be put into place. Because the United States is a states' rights country, the assessments, how we're going to evaluate those assessments, the curriculum will be determined by each state. But the curriculum has been set and voted on and approved by each of the states that are involved. So the curriculum is a curriculum set at a national standard. And in fact, the countries with the greatest, or perceived to be the greatest educations, K-12 education systems in the world, all have Common Core. So we are actually in a catch-up mode. The superintendent establishes the curriculum, and then it is up to the the building principals to work within their staffs to make sure that it is understood what the curriculum demands and expectations are, which is what a standard curriculum is. Pacing guides are set on a citywide basis, and it's important so that if you have a child at one school in the 3rd grade and transfers to another school in the 3rd grade, that in fact they're going to be taught the same curriculum in both of those schools.
Ms. Murphy.
Thank you. You know, in Connecticut, the board is essentially an agent of the state. And under our Connecticut general statutes, it's very clear that the Board of Education shall establish a school district curriculum committee, and the committee shall recommend develop, review, approve all curriculum for the local school district. So I think it's quite clear where that responsibility to establish the curriculum lies. I also believe that it's imperative that the board and the committee of the board have access to all the experts to make sure they're well advised and informed before they make any decisions on the curriculum decisions. I would also hope that the superintendent would always make many suggestions to the board of what would be appropriate curriculum, after taking into account, of course, what teachers and principals and their suggestions may be as well. Thank you.
Thank you. The members of the Board of Education are not educators, which is the reason why we hire a superintendent who will determine with his staff what is the appropriate curriculum. The Board of Education adopts and approves textbooks. I believe that the law that Ms. Murphy read was pretty clear. It was clear in my mind. The Board of Education does not decide what the curriculum is going to be, because we are not the educators. Currently in Stamford, there are many teachers and administrators who work on the curriculum committee. They work under the direction of the superintendent. They revise and adopt and suggest changes to curriculum. It doesn't come to the Board of Education for a vote. We vote on the textbooks. We do control the dollars, but we don't control what curriculum is going to be delivered in the classroom.
Is there any further comment anybody would like to make? No? We can go to the next question, and we will repeat back to you, Mrs. Klein. What instructional or other approaches would you support to eliminate the achievement gap?